"Come on, little mouse, don't be such a prude," sneered Brad Whitman, the president of Sigma Alpha Epsilon, as he and 3 other fraternity brothers cornered me in the empty library stacks on that October evening in 1977. "We know you want this. Quiet girls like you are always the wildest once you loosen up a little." His hands grabbed at my sweater while his friends blocked my escape routes, their alcohol-fueled laughter echoing through the deserted academic building. What these privileged fraternity boys didn't know was that the shy little nobody they were about to assault was Elizabeth Margaret Thornton, daughter of Supreme Court Justice Robert Thornton, and in exactly 48 hours, their comfortable world of entitlement and immunity was about to collide with the full force of American justice. My name is Elizabeth Thornton, and this is the story of how one night of violence in 1977 changed not only my life, but also campus sexual assault policies at universities across the nation. I was 19 years old then, a sophomore at Georgetown University who had spent my first year and a half trying to blend into the background, to be invisible, to avoid the kind of attention that came with being the daughter of one of the most powerful jurists in America. Most of my classmates knew me simply as Liz, a quiet pre-law student who studied hard, kept to herself, and seemed to have no family connections or social aspirations that might make her interesting to the campus elite. Growing up as the daughter of a Supreme Court justice had taught me early that anonymity was a form of protection, that drawing attention to my family connections would change how people treated me and make it impossible to build genuine friendships based on who I was rather than who my father was. "Lizzie, your safety and your ability to live a normal life depend on people not knowing about our family," my father had explained when I left for college. "The court receives thousands of threats every year, and some very dangerous people would love to hurt me by hurting you. Promise me you'll be careful about who you trust with information about our family." The decision to attend Georgetown under my mother's maiden name, Elizabeth Carson, instead of Elizabeth Thornton, had been both practical and liberating, allowing me to experience college life without the burden of constant security details or the suspicion that people were only interested in me because of my father's position. For 18 months, I had successfully maintained my cover as an ordinary middle-class student whose parents were in government work, but nothing more specific or important. The academic excellence that had always come naturally to me was both a blessing and a curse in the competitive environment of Georgetown's pre-law program, where students jockeyed for positions that might lead to prestigious internships and judicial clerkships. My consistent top grades and thoughtful class participation had earned respect from professors, and some resentment from classmates who couldn't understand how the quiet girl from nowhere was outperforming students with family connections and expensive preparatory educations. "Carson's probably some kind of scholarship kid who has to study twice as hard as the rest of us," I had overheard Brad Whitman telling his fraternity brothers after our constitutional law class. "These desperate types will do anything to get ahead, including making the rest of us look bad with their grade-grubbing behavior." His casual cruelty and assumption that academic success was somehow illegitimate if achieved by someone without obvious social advantages was typical of the entitled attitudes that pervaded campus culture. The harassment that began in early October started subtly, with comments about my appearance, my study habits, and my apparent social isolation that seemed designed to make me feel self-conscious and unwelcome in spaces that the fraternity brothers considered their territory. "Hey, library mouse, don't you ever have any fun?" Chad Morrison would ask when he encountered me in study areas. "All work and no play makes girls weird and uptight. Maybe you need someone to show you how to relax." The escalation from verbal harassment to physical intimidation happened gradually, as the fraternity brothers became bolder in their attempts to assert dominance over what they perceived as an easy target. Blocking my path in hallways, standing too close during conversations, and making increasingly explicit comments about what they wanted to do to me became part of their routine entertainment. "You know what your problem is, Carson?" Derek Thompson had said just days before the assault. "You think you're too good for guys like us. But deep down, you know you want what we're offering. It's just a matter of time before you stop pretending to be something you're not." The evening of October 15th had started like any other. with me settling into my usual study carrel on the 4th floor of the Lowinger Library to work on a research paper about due process rights. The library was nearly empty by 9 p.m., with most students either at parties or in their dorms, leaving me alone with my books and the comfortable silence that I had always found conducive to deep concentration. I had no idea that my isolation and predictable schedule had made me a target for young men who viewed other people as objects to be used for their entertainment. The sound of footsteps approaching my study area made me look up from my constitutional law textbook, expecting to see a librarian or another serious student seeking a quiet place to work. Instead, I found myself facing Brad Whitman, Chad Morrison, Derek Thompson, and Kyle Patterson, 4 of Sigma Alpha Epsilon's most prominent members, all visibly intoxicated and wearing the kind of predatory expressions that made my blood run cold. "Well, well, if it isn't our favorite little bookworm," Brad said with mock friendliness, as the 4 of them arranged themselves to block my access to the main aisle. "We were just talking about you at the house, wondering why such a pretty girl spends all her time hiding in the library instead of having fun with people who could show her a good time." The menace in his voice was barely concealed beneath a veneer of fraternity charm that fooled no one. "I'm trying to study," I said firmly, gathering my books and papers in preparation to leave. "Please move so I can get past." My attempt to project confidence despite my growing fear was met with cruel laughter from all 4 young men, who clearly viewed my discomfort as entertainment rather than a signal to back off. Before you continue this powerful story of courage, justice, and the fight against campus sexual assault, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales about young women who refused to be victims and change the world by demanding accountability from those who thought they were untouchable. "Oh, we're just getting started, sweetheart," Chad said, moving closer until I could smell the alcohol on his breath and see the cruel anticipation in his eyes. "You've been playing hard to get for months, but tonight we're going to show you what you've been missing. No more hiding behind books and pretending you don't want what every girl wants from guys like us." The realization that they intended to assault me right there in the library, stacks hit me like a physical blow, as I understood that my months of trying to avoid their attention had only made them more determined to assert their dominance over me. These privileged young men, who had probably never faced real consequences for their actions, saw me as nothing more than an object to be conquered and discarded. "Please don't do this," I said, backing against the bookshelf as they closed in around me. "You'll regret this. There will be consequences." My warning was met with more laughter, as they clearly believed that a quiet scholarship student had no power or connections that could threaten their comfortable positions at one of America's most prestigious universities. "Consequences?" Derek laughed. "From who? You're nobody, Carson. Nobody's going to believe you, and even if they did, nobody's going to care. We're Sigma Alpha Epsilon. Our fathers are senators and judges and business leaders. You're just some sad little girl who studies too much and has no friends. Who's going to take your word against ours?" Their absolute confidence in their immunity from accountability was both terrifying and infuriating, representing everything that was wrong with a system that protected privileged young men while leaving vulnerable students without recourse or support. But what they didn't understand was that their victim was not as powerless as she appeared, and that justice sometimes comes from unexpected directions. The assault that followed was both physical and psychological, as the 4 fraternity brothers took turns grabbing at my clothes, pushing me against the bookshelf, and making increasingly violent threats about what they planned to do to me. "Stop struggling, you little tease," Brad snarled, as I fought to break free from their encircling arms. "This is what you wanted all along. Quiet girls like you are always begging for attention, and now you're getting more than you can handle." My screams for help echoed through the empty library stacks, but the building's soundproofing and the late hour meant that no one was likely to hear or respond to my cries. The isolation that I had sought for studying had become a trap that enabled their attack, giving them the privacy they needed to assault me without fear of interruption or witnesses. "Shut her up before someone hears," Chad ordered, clamping his hand over my mouth while the others tore at my sweater and jeans. "We don't have all night, and she's making too much noise. Just hold her still, and let's get this over with." The casual way they discussed my assault, as if it were nothing more than an inconvenient task to be completed quickly, was almost as traumatic as the physical violence itself. The intervention that saved me from rape came from an unexpected source, Dr. Patricia Williams, a constitutional law professor who had returned to the library to retrieve files she needed for the next day's classes. The sound of my muffled screams drew her attention to the fourth-floor stacks, where she discovered 4 young men in the process of sexually assaulting a female student. "Get away from her right now," Dr. Williams commanded with the authority of someone accustomed to controlling classrooms full of entitled students. "I'm calling campus security and the police. Don't move a muscle, any of you." Her arrival disrupted the assault and gave me the opportunity to break free from my attackers, though not before they had torn my clothes and left bruises that would serve as evidence of their crime. The immediate aftermath was chaotic and traumatic, as campus security and local police responded to Dr. Williams's call while the 4 fraternity brothers attempted to minimize their actions and shift blame to their victim. "This is all a misunderstanding," Brad insisted to the arriving officers. "We were just talking to her, and she got hysterical. You know how girls can be when they've been drinking and studying too hard." "I haven't been drinking," I said firmly, despite my torn clothes and obvious distress. "These men cornered me, grabbed me, and were attempting to rape me when Dr. Williams interrupted them. I want them arrested for sexual assault." My clear statement of facts was met with skeptical looks from some of the responding officers, who seemed inclined to treat the incident as a college prank gone too far, rather than a serious crime. The hospital examination that followed was thorough and professionally conducted, documenting the physical evidence of assault while also providing me with medical care and counseling support. "Miss Carson, I want you to know that what happened to you was not your fault," said Dr. Sarah Martinez, the emergency room physician who treated my injuries. "These young men committed serious crimes, and the evidence we're collecting will help ensure they face appropriate consequences." The decision to press formal charges against my attackers was both difficult and necessary, as I understood that allowing them to escape accountability would endanger other women while sending the message that privileged students could assault their classmates without facing real consequences. "I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law," I told Detective James O'Brien during my formal statement. "What they did to me was premeditated, coordinated, and would have been completed if not for Dr. Williams's intervention." The phone call I made to my parents from the hospital was one of the most difficult conversations of my life, as I had to explain not only that I had been assaulted, but also that my cover identity was about to be blown in a very public way. "Daddy, something's happened at school," I began, my voice shaking with emotion and exhaustion. "I'm okay now, but I need you to know that some students attacked me tonight, and I'm going to have to testify against them." My father's response was immediate and characteristically measured, as he processed both the personal trauma to his daughter and the potential legal and political implications of the case. "Elizabeth, the most important thing is that you're safe," he said, with the calm authority that had served him well on the Supreme Court. "Everything else can be handled. Do you need me to come to Washington tonight?" The media attention that began building within hours of my attacker's arrest was intense and unwelcome, as reporters discovered that the victim in a high-profile campus sexual assault case was the daughter of a Supreme Court justice. "Supreme Court Justice's daughter assaulted at Georgetown," read the headline in the Washington Post. "Fraternity brothers charged in attack on Justice Thornton's daughter," announced the New York Times. The coverage was both helpful and harmful, bringing attention to campus sexual assault, while also destroying the anonymity I had worked so hard to maintain. The university's initial response was disappointing and predictable, as administrators seemed more concerned about protecting the institution's reputation than supporting assault victims or holding perpetrators accountable. "Miss Thornton, we understand this has been a traumatic experience," said Dean Robert Harrison during our meeting. "Perhaps it would be best for everyone if we handled this matter through internal disciplinary procedures rather than involving the criminal justice system." His suggestion that I should accept university discipline instead of criminal prosecution was both insulting and revealing, showing how institutions of higher education routinely protected sexual predators by minimizing their crimes and pressuring victims to accept inadequate remedies. "Dean Harrison, these men committed felony sexual assault," I replied firmly. "The appropriate venue for addressing felony crimes is the criminal justice system, not a university disciplinary committee." The legal strategy developed by the prosecutors assigned to my case was comprehensive and aggressive, treating the assault as the serious crime it was rather than the college prank that defense attorneys would undoubtedly claim. "Miss Thornton, we have strong physical evidence, credible witness testimony, and a clear pattern of premeditated criminal behavior," explained Assistant District Attorney Janet Morrison. "We're going to prosecute these defendants for attempted rape, sexual assault, and conspiracy, and we're confident we can secure convictions." The support I received from other women on campus was overwhelming and deeply moving, as students who had experienced similar harassment or assault came forward to share their stories and express solidarity with my decision to seek justice. "Thank you for having the courage to report this," wrote one anonymous letter I received. "So many of us have been too afraid or too ashamed to come forward. But seeing you stand up to these predators gives us hope that things might finally change." The intimidation campaign launched by the Fraternity brothers and their supporters was predictable, but still disturbing, as they attempted to discredit my testimony and convince me to drop the charges through harassment and threats. "You're going to regret this, Thornton," Derek Thompson said when he encountered me on campus. "We have connections you can't imagine, and we're going to make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are." Their threats were empty bluster from young men who had never faced real accountability for their actions. But they also demonstrated the entitlement and arrogance that had motivated their assault in the first place. These privileged students genuinely believed that their family connections and social status should protect them from consequences, even when they committed violent crimes against their classmates. The trial that began 6 months after the assault was a media circus that brought national attention to issues of campus sexual assault and the culture of entitlement that protected privileged perpetrators. "Fraternity brothers face justice in Georgetown assault case" read headlines across the country as the case became a symbol of the broader struggle to hold campus sexual predators accountable for their crimes. The testimony I gave during the trial was detailed, compelling, and difficult, as I recounted every aspect of the assault, while defense attorneys attempted to portray me as a vindictive young woman, seeking revenge against popular students who had rejected her romantic advances. "Miss Thornton, isn't it true that you were angry about being excluded from social events by my clients?" asked Brad Whitman's attorney during cross-examination. "No, that's completely false," I replied firmly. "I had no interest in social events with your clients. I was assaulted because they viewed me as an easy target who couldn't fight back or seek justice. They were wrong about that." My clear, consistent testimony was corroborated by physical evidence and witness statements that demolished the defense's attempts to blame the victim. Dr. Williams' testimony about discovering the assault in progress was devastating to the defendant's claims of innocence, as she described in detail what she had witnessed and the obvious distress I had displayed. "There was no question that Miss Thornton was being assaulted against her will," she testified. "Her clothes were torn, she was crying and struggling, and the defendants were clearly attempting to commit rape when I interrupted them." The character witnesses who testified on behalf of the defendants painted them as outstanding young men whose bright futures would be ruined by criminal convictions, completely ignoring the impact of their crimes on their victim. "Brad is a natural leader who has contributed tremendously to campus life," testified Sigma Alpha Epsilon's faculty advisor. "A conviction would destroy the promising career he has planned in law and public service." The prosecutor's response to these character testimonials was swift and pointed, emphasizing that the defendants' privileged backgrounds and social status were not mitigating factors, but rather aggravating circumstances that made their crimes more serious. These young men had every advantage in life, Assistant District Attorney Morrison argued. They chose to use those advantages to prey on a vulnerable classmate, demonstrating a level of entitlement and disregard for others that makes them dangerous to society. The verdicts, when they came after 3 days of deliberation, were comprehensive and satisfying, as all 4 defendants were found guilty on multiple counts of sexual assault and conspiracy. Brad Whitman received 4 years in prison, Chad Morrison got 3 years, Derek Thompson was sentenced to 2.5 years, and Kyle Patterson received 2 years. The sentences were significant enough to serve as deterrents while also acknowledging the seriousness of their crimes. The impact of the convictions extended far beyond the individual defendants, as universities across the country began reviewing and strengthening their policies regarding sexual assault reporting, investigation, and prevention. The Thornton case has become a watershed moment in campus sexual assault law, legal scholars would later write. It demonstrated that even privileged perpetrators can be held accountable when victims have the courage to seek justice. The changes in my own life following the trial were profound and lasting, as I discovered strengths and purposes I had never known I possessed. The shy, retiring student who had tried to remain invisible had become a powerful advocate for sexual assault survivors and a voice for campus safety reform. "Elizabeth, you've found your calling," my father observed during one of our conversations about my future plans. Sometimes terrible experiences can lead to important work that helps other people. The scholarship fund I established for sexual assault survivors who needed financial assistance for legal fees and counseling services became one of my most meaningful contributions to campus safety reform. The Thornton Foundation for Campus Justice provided resources that enabled other victims to seek accountability from their attackers, breaking down the financial barriers that often prevented working-class students from pursuing criminal charges against wealthy defendants. The speaking engagements I began accepting at universities across the country allowed me to share my story while educating students about consent, reporting procedures, and the importance of supporting assault survivors. "What happened to me could happen to anyone," I would tell audiences. But what happened after my assault, the investigation, prosecution, and conviction of my attackers, should also be available to every survivor who chooses to seek justice. The law degree I completed, despite the trauma and publicity surrounding my case, opened doors to a career in victims' rights advocacy and criminal justice reform. "You've turned your worst experience into your life's work," commented Professor Williams, who had become both a mentor and a friend. "That takes incredible strength and demonstrates the kind of character that will serve you well in whatever you choose to do." The marriage to David Chen, a fellow law student who had supported me throughout the trial and its aftermath, represented both personal healing and professional partnership, as we built a life together dedicated to justice and service. "You taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear," David said during his wedding vows. "It's doing what's right despite being afraid. That's the woman I fell in love with, and that's the woman I'm proud to call my wife." The children we raised, 2 daughters who grew up understanding both their privilege and their responsibilities, learned early that power should be used to protect the vulnerable rather than exploit them. "Mom, why did those boys think they could hurt you and get away with it?" my younger daughter asked when she was old enough to understand the basics of my story. "Because they had been taught that their comfort mattered more than other people's safety," I explained. "But they learned that everyone answers to justice eventually." The Supreme Court clerkship I accepted after law school allowed me to work alongside my father while maintaining my commitment to victims' rights and criminal justice reform. "Having you here brings a perspective that this court needs," Justice Thornton told me during one of our professional consultations. "Your experience reminds us that the law serves real people who deserve protection from those who would harm them." The nonprofit organization I founded, the National Campus Safety Institute, became a leading voice in advocating for stronger sexual assault policies and better support services for survivors. "Elizabeth Thornton's work has literally saved lives," wrote the president of the Association of American Universities. "Her advocacy has made campuses safer for millions of students who will never know how much they owe her." Looking back on that terrible night in 1977, I understand that the assault was a turning point that revealed both the worst and best aspects of human nature. 4 privileged young men chose to use their advantages to harm someone they perceived as powerless, but their actions also inspired countless others to work for justice, safety, and accountability. The shy college girl who was attacked in a library became a powerful advocate whose work changed how America addresses campus sexual assault. The trauma that was meant to silence me instead gave me a voice that has been heard in courtrooms, classrooms, and legislative chambers across the nation. The legacy of that night lives on in stronger laws, better policies, improved support services, and the understanding that privilege does not provide immunity from accountability. Sometimes the most important changes in society come from ordinary people who refuse to accept injustice, even when fighting back seems impossible. The Supreme Court Justice's daughter, who was assaulted by fraternity boys, learned that justice is not automatic, but it is achievable when people are willing to fight for it. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to be silenced, and sometimes the most important battles are fought by those who never intended to become warriors.